know your name, I swear I do. It's on the tip of my tongue. Sorry, what did you say? I've known you for how long? Your face is so familiar, but no name comes to mind. Please, can you remind me if you'll be so kind? Staring out into space, asking God to hear my case. Trying to think of all things past. How long will my memory last?
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. This is your host, Joy Loverde, founder of Alzheimer Speaks, and I'm thrilled to be with you today. As you know, I just totally adore my job, and I thank my mom every day for all the lessons she taught me during her 30 days of dementia. Before I introduce our guests, I always like to tell our new listeners a little bit about us. So, bottom line, Alzheimer Speaks is an advocacy-based company providing multiple platforms to shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort around the world. We're also known as a media outlet for those who are looking to reach families and businesses and individuals dealing with dementia. We believe at our core that by joining forces and sharing knowledge and just having these everyday conversations about life with dementia, that is really the only way we're going to remove the stigmas and we're going to get the tools that people need into their hands. And we know that it's working. We've been doing this since 2011, and I've just been so honored from the people all around the world that we have been able to have on guests and to help lift their voice in terms of what their mission is in terms of shifting our dementia care crisis. We also believe that collaboration is just critical, and it's the only way we're going to win our battle against dementia. And we know that it's working thanks to each and every one of you. You see, your likes, your clicks, your shares with your Facebook friends, with your LinkedIn colleagues, with your Twitter tribes, with your Pinterest peeps, in your newsletters, all of those forums are pushing information out and allowing people to not be so afraid of dementia, to give them the impression that there are tools, there are resources, there are people out there that want to help. And because of all of your sharing, again, I can't thank you enough for getting us recognized as the #1 influencer online according to ShareCare and Dr. Oz. We were also recognized by Maria Shriver as an architect of change, and just recently named by Oprah one of 14 of her health heroes for 2018. And those accolades, they go to all of us because this truly is a joint effort. So if you're listening and you have a story to tell, you want someone to know what your thoughts are, what your ideas are regarding dementia and caregiving, reach out to me. Everyone is welcome. This is a very respectful platform. We want everyone to feel comfortable, and all opinions are allowed. So, just give me a jingle at 651-748-4714, or you can just shoot me an email, and I'd be more than glad to talk to you. We have people living with dementia. We have families. We have businesses. We've had entertainers from singers and songwriters to movie directors, authors. Harvard Research has been on the show. So, again, we're about raising everyone's voice because it takes all of us to pull things together. I do want to give a shout out to a couple of companies that I just highly, highly adore. One is the American Senior Magazine. They have what I love, big print and great articles. Plus, they've got some games and activities in there. You can go to alzheimerspeaks.com to get more information and get a discount actually for a subscription if you'd like. The Call Alert Center for Caregivers is absolutely fantastic. Again, they've got a banner on our website as well where you can get 20% off, and it's a low-cost a tool that you can have in case a loved one or a client may wander, because we never know when that's going to happen, and it's under $15 a year. Plus, you get that 20% off. And then, of course, the Alzheimer's Research and Prevention Foundation. Again, they are doing such cool stuff holistically to help people deal and manage with dementia. I don't know if any of you read, but I was really highly disappointed and saddened that Pfizer has decided to halt all the research on Alzheimer's and Parkinson's treatment. And I just, they have been such a major player in the game, and I'm hoping that we will hear more about that later, because very, very important for us in terms of finding a cure is to be able to have these large companies continue to pursue research regarding Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. I also wanted to just last mention the Women's Alzheimer's Movement by Maria Shriver. It's known as WHAM. Feel free to check that out. And they're doing some great things. They typically do their Move for the Mind event in the summer, and that might be something that you want to participate in. So let me introduce our guest today. Like I said, I am very excited to have her with us. We are lucky to have author Joy Loverde with us, and she has just done some incredible work in terms of putting her book together, which is called Who Will Take Care of Me When I'm Old? She is a consultant on active aging and also in the elder care industry, just extremely active herself. She has worked on preparing her books for aging and family caregivers. And I'm just, like I said, I'm thrilled to have her with us. She's going to talk about safeguarding your health and happiness in old age. She is also the author of the Complete Elder Care Planner. So please welcome Joy with us. And Joy, again, thrilled to have you. How are you today?
Lori, I'm really good. I've been a fan of yours since 2011. I know that you are doing groundbreaking work. I have followed you all the time. You're one of my mentors in being so sensitive to all the dimensions of dementia and Alzheimer's. So thank you for everything that you do to help everyone.
Oh, well, thank you. One of the questions I ask everybody who comes on the show, just so people kind of get a base of where you're coming from, and that question is this: have you been personally touched by dementia with maybe family or a friend who's been diagnosed?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I don't know anyone who hasn't been touched with this. We can't help but be immediately in the presence of someone who, if they are not experiencing the symptoms of dementia, they are afraid that they will be. So absolutely, I've personal experiences and have for a long time.
Okay, great. I appreciate you sharing that. It just, I think it gives our audience a little bit more background in terms of where you're coming from. Now, what pushed you to write this book? Who's going to take care of me when I'm old?
Well, interestingly enough, I began to write this book about 10 years ago, and the timing wasn't quite right. The Complete Elder Care Planner, my other book, is doing just fine, and every time I would do a keynote presentation, someone inevitably would come up to me after my talk, and they would say, my parents have me, but I have no one. So who's going to do this for me when I get old? And I knew then that I would have to begin the process of collecting resources and coming up with strategies so that now we're coming full circle. And the conversation about elder care is now all about us. And that's the whole picture. It just came full circle.
Yeah, and that I get that too when I'm out speaking. It's a scary thing, and more people are, divorced or have never been married, don't have children, and yeah, it's very, very spooky. I was doing a Dementia Chats, which is our webinar where I interview people with dementia, and the topic came up a little bit about, not everybody has somebody. There's a lot of single people out here, and that's huge. That's a big factor. So
right, the big thing that's happening is people are just starting to talk about it more, and that's good. We have to start initiating these conversations.
Yeah. Now, in your book, you have some great chapter titles: Personal Readiness, Where You Live Matters, Ties That Bind and Unwind. That one just just hit me, just that title, because you hear that so often, people leaving. There is no tomorrow, and then safety nets. And under that chapter of safety nets, you really get into, some dementia, and, that's what I really want to focus on. But in that safety net section, you've got, Dr. Me, reframing sickness and health. Chronic illness is a game changer, repairing those holes in your safety net. I mean, you really take a close look at what can one do, to be ready and to be the best prepared. But what I really wanted to focus on initially, and then we kind of go back to the whole of the book, but was, early onset Alzheimer's and the value of knowing, because so many people are afraid to know. They're worried about it, but it's like, I'm just not sure I want to go there yet. So why don't we talk a little bit about just about that title and why you even chose that? What was pulling at you?
Okay, well, that was a thought that came to me when I thought about how I was hearing stories from people about being totally taken by surprise by someone that they love getting diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's. And so I said to myself, I'm going to put a chapter in here so that I can talk about the benefits of knowing early on. For example, being able to stay in control of making important decisions or minimizing risks of accidents and injuring others. Who doesn't want to take over their finances and make sure that they don't experience financial scams and abuse? So these and other criteria were driving me to want to encourage people to at least give some of the idea about planning ahead with the possible presence of living with symptoms of dementia in mind. So, and there isn't anybody that I talk to today, like you said, that doesn't make a mention of, this scares me. This is really hard to deal with, and especially if it runs in the family, what am I supposed to do? So that was what drove me to say there needs to be a conversation within this book about having the benefits of knowing early on.
Yeah. Well, and I love, when you say about having the conversation, we can't make change if we don't have a conversation. We can't make good choices if we don't have a conversation. We can't know what somebody else wants if we never ask them. And one of the things that I hear from people with dementia is that actually once they get a diagnosis, they're so relieved. So part of, what I want the audience to think about is, as scary as it is, the unknown is even scarier. And when you have a diagnosis, at least you can now explain it to others. Because I can't tell you how many times, and I'm sure you hear this all the time too, where people will look at me and say, well, you look fine. This can't be the case. You look fine, because they're in denial. They don't want you to have a chronic illness. But we have to push our fears aside and deal with reality so that everybody can live the best possible life. And it doesn't have to be scary. We're the ones making it scary. We're the ones that have kept it in the closet, so we haven't gotten the research dollars and we haven't gotten the push that it needs because we're not having the conversation. And granted, the bar has definitely raised just even in the last couple of years, but it needs to still raise so much more. We have to get more people engaged.
You're right. I can't agree with you more. I know that the people who are getting tested earlier because they have specific examples of why they think they may have some kind of dementia, these are our role models. These are the people who are so brave and so willing to take on this task of teaching the rest of us. What is life like for you? What do you want from me? What do you need from me? How can I help? And in the meantime, what can I do to make sure that your success is facilitated for as long as possible? I'm sure you're reading stories about people who are now diagnosed in their 20s and their 30s and their 40s, how brave these people are. And I can't get reading enough about them so that they remind me of what it means to be responsible.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it's wonderful to hear that patient side. I mean, in any situation, we have to talk to the person in the center, that it's affecting, or we're never ever going to be able to truly meet their needs because we haven't asked, we haven't understood, and we can't avoid maybe trigger situations that many of them are easily avoided if we would have a conversation and know that, the light or the glare is going to be something that's not going to be good for them, or whatever it might be, crowds and noisy places and backgrounds and a lot of things we can make changes to help people live better, with a diagnosis. Now, you say in this chapter that after completing it, people will walk away with more weight to advantages and disadvantages of getting early testing or early screening. They can create plans for financial long-term care. They can help them get their legal affairs in order, be able to track the disease per well-defined stages, and effectively share their diagnosis with grandchildren and help change the face of Alzheimer's disease as a whole. And I think that those are just great things to be able to walk away with. I want to talk about, sharing the diagnosis with grandchildren because I think, and I want to talk about all of them, but I want to start there because I just, that one just kind of melts my heart, and I think I really believe in intergenerational engagement. So what made you put that piece in? Because the other things are kind of more practical, things that people talk about, but that one's really relationship-based.
Well, I have heard the parents of grandchildren tell me they don't understand why grandma or grandpa is treating them differently. And the parent had a very difficult time talking to the grandchild and explaining what was going on. And I said to myself, well, if someone gets an early diagnosis, perhaps the best person to do the talking initially is the person who was just diagnosed, and to do your best job to treat each child individually and sustain the relationship as best you can, and just tell them what you can based on what you think is the child's basis of understanding. And just like you said before, the idea is to make sure you're talking to the children or the child and not pretending like the child does not notice, because children are quite, they know what's going on, as we all know. whether they're, and it's like, why wouldn't you take charge of these relationships and just do your best? Your best is good enough to tell them what's going on.
Yeah, and that is so true, how kids know. And I know, this was a long time ago, but, my mom had the disease for 30 years. And initially, it wasn't talked about. And then I got pulled into the loop fairly early on with my dad. And it was just kind of he and I, but we didn't really talk about it with the rest of the family, not my siblings, not her siblings, not friends. It was just really kind of this private thing. And yet everybody knew what was going on. And then my daughter, who has only known her grandma with dementia, didn't know that there was anything wrong. That was just who grandma was. But she was always, as she got older, part of the conversation. And she's now in the business as an activities director in life enrichment, whatever you want to call it. But, I think it was really life-changing for her. And she was able to give my mom so much joy and peace because of her interaction. And that's so precious, just so precious with that.
Grandchildren.
Yep, they're pretty wonderful in so many ways. I used to also go into the schools and talk with junior high and high school kids, and they would talk about how their family dynamics changed, but nobody would tell them how they could help. And so I think again, that's so important.
What a neat idea you just gave the listeners, that perhaps if you have grandchildren who are dealing with this family dynamic, perhaps inviting the person the grandparent to school with the grandchild and just do, a sharing of some kind in front of the whole class. Wouldn't that be incredible?
Yep. Well, when I've gone in and talked, they actually talked about putting together like support groups for the kids. They're like, we have support groups for everything else. Why can't we have one for caring for someone? Because what families don't realize, and I'll put my own in there, is that we think we're protecting our children, but the family dynamics are changing, and they don't understand why. But all of a sudden, they're not getting as much attention, and someone else has come into play. So in a child's mind, they're thinking, what have I done wrong? And that's just where they go. Because it's not explained why, mom or dad is spending more time with grandma and grandpa or whoever it might be, and less time with them, or having to miss some sports games or whatever it might be. We need to have those conversations. We need to keep those lines of communication open. And, this disease isn't going away. So we need our kids to be prepared. We need our children to be compassionate. We need them to be involved. We need them to be creative catalysts, because they have some cool ideas, that can really help this whole dimension of dementia. And I remember my mom just perking right up when the little kids would come around. She'd be sound asleep, but she would know when the little ones were around, and was just connected with them on a whole nother level. Now, in this chapter, you also talk about money, memory, and more. So what would you like our listeners to know about that? Because I think that touches on three, really important factors, because our heads are spinning, when this diagnosis hits.
Oh. Right. Well, if you think you might be comfortable financially now, this is one of those diseases that will rapidly devour your financial resources. So the first thing I would do if I got a diagnosis is I would go sit down with my financial planner and say, how in the heck am I going to do this? There is so so much of a need to have money, but a real close second to that, besides paying for drugs and special care workers and things like that, is creating a plan for safeguarding your financial well-being. So what about what guidelines are you going to put in place with your financial advisors or your family about not getting scammed? And that's the other thing I would do right out of the gate. Is there are certain things that we can put in place, like a letter that is an agreement, and it could even be informal between you and your financial planner that says, hey, if you see that I am not tracking you mind-wise, please let me or someone I love know that you're concerned about that. So these would be safety measures that we'd be putting in place right out of the gate.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's really important because the whole scamming issue is just so huge these days. I just heard of another one the other day, and it just makes my head spin. It's like as soon as one gets squashed, there's another one out there, and it can happen on, on a mass level, or it can just happen on a individual, personal level, where somebody comes in and takes power of attorney over and pushes the family out, and it can be a perfect stranger or a neighbor or a friend, and weird things happen when it comes to money, and people really need to have a good healthy discussion on that. You also talk about housing, and I think that's just such a critical one, and part of why I probably come from that space was I was in real estate for 25 years and dealt with people on that issue all the time. And I am so in agreement with you about the earlier you find out, the more input and planning you can be involved in for the future of your own life. And I know people look at it, they seem to frame it as end of life, and I don't want to go there. And really, it's smart living. It's good living. It's maximizing things, and we have to get people to switch their mindsets on that. Don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Alzheimer's is a chronic disease, no different than Parkinson's or arthritis. And so we make plans to alter our lives, but it doesn't change the essence of who we are. We want to stay in control. We want to look ahead, surround ourselves with the kinds of people who can teach us what to do, and then live our life. Alzheimer's is not a prescription to stop living. Nothing is. No chronic illness is. We can sustain a quality of life as long as we're willing to take a deep breath and start making plans and put things in writing. Lori, I think about the many people who are going to get this disease or currently have it, and they have no one. Now, that's not uncommon. As you said in the beginning of the introduction of the conversation, there are plenty of people who have no one, including their choice to be childless. So that requires a certain amount of responsibility of surrounding yourself with people and professionals today as soon as possible.
Yep, I totally agree with that. The other thing is. It always amazed me, even when I was in real estate, was people would think, well, I can't call somebody unless I'm going to move right now, or they're going to hound me, to find out, what are their assets that they're sitting on right now, or going for tours. And people, the good ones aren't going to hound you, and there's very few, I think, out there that actually will. They want to build a relationship. They want to get to know you.
Yeah.
I'll never forget the woman. It was like 11, or it might have even been 14 years after I went out to her house, and I touched base with her twice a year, just checking in, no big deal. And she called me out, and we were sitting in the living room, and then she got up and said, excuse me, and then she went to her kitchen drawer, and she pulled out the information I gave her all those years prior. And I was so shocked. But we had developed a relationship over that time that was comfortable, and she knew who I was. You know, I had another woman who actually put me in her will because her kids, she's like, my kids are fighting over who's going to sell my house because they all want their real estate agent, and I want you. And so she wrote me in her will to make sure that I was the one to sell her house because I had sold and found them other houses, you know, over the years, and that's where but she was going to take control. You know, she wanted it done her way. And
it's so good. So good.
Yeah, and she wasn't embarrassed about it. It made her feel good. It made her feel good, and she knew that her kids couldn't fight. They couldn't argue over it. It was decided.
She was pretty darn smart.
Yeah.
You bring up a really good point. For people who want to avoid family squabbles and for people who have no family to depend on, if you look around your local community, there are people that are so knowledgeable about every aspect of planning for a longer life, whether it's money or health care or housing and so on. And the earliest that you can create a relationship with these people, they don't need to sell you anything. They probably won't if you just tell them, I just need to know you're there. And I would like you to get to know me just as much as I would like to get to know you, because the day might come when I need to call you. So would you just know that I'm not going to move in and I'm not interested in selling my house, but would you sustain a relationship with me? And could I call you in case I have a question you can answer? What in the world is stopping anybody from making these kinds of casual, semi-formal relationships now, especially if there's no family around? It's the wisest thing we can do is just get to know your community professionals. They are there to help for the most part.
Yep. Yeah, and they really, you know, things have changed so much in terms of how they do business, and the laws have gotten much stricter too on what they can and cannot do, and know that you are always in control, you know, of that situation, you know, to say no and to stop, and you know. If someone's bugging you, you know, what do you do if you got bad service someplace else? You call the manager. You can do the same thing, you know.
Or you just put it on Yelp.
Exactly. And if you don't know how to do that, your kids or grandkids can probably help you with that. What's your feeling about going out and touring places in terms of where you want to live?
Well, this would start with the money card, of course. All you have to do is first question. You might not even have to get out of the house, but definitely call at no less than 3 to 5 places and find out how much these places cost. And then they can send you a copy of their agreements, and then the first thing you do is you take that agreement and you take it with you to a legal advisor who will look over the agreements. So that would be the first thing for my plan. Then if I agree that yes, I could negotiate the agreement and yes, I probably could afford it, then I would do self-guided tours, meaning I would show up without notice, and I would go there in all 3 times a day, different times a day, morning, noon, and night, and especially on the weekends, because the weekends are when you find out how many people are available to assist when it's a lower number of people available. You know, there is a reason why the good places are full, and you need to find out which places have waiting lists and why are they so good, and that's the homework that we're required to do in order to get good care later on. The bad places don't have a waiting list, and they're always available, but it's just matter of asking questions, and then also when you go there in person, how do you feel? How do you feel about these people? And then, of course, getting references.
Mm-hmm. And I think, too, one of the things that I always tell people about references is know who you're getting them from, because references are great, but, if your personality is different probably from the person you're getting the reference from. So what's important to them and what they liked about that person may be different than you. And I have seen people go, well, my Aunt Betty gave me this referral, and I really feel like I have to go there because they're worried about her feelings. It's like, no, you have to worry about your business, your comfort level. And if that's not the right match, that's okay. Recognize that and talk about that. Again, it gets down to us being comfortable having a conversation and, visit a place more than once. Ask people who live there, what do they like and what don't they like? See if you can get tours from them, because they truly are the voice. And because staff can change, too. So just because you like something 3 years ago, if you're deciding it's time to move, take another run at it and check, because cultures change, staff changes, residents will change, and all of that can make a difference as well.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. One question I always ask is this a good place to work? What's the average length of time an employee has worked at this organization? If they're doing lots of revolving door employees in and out and hiring and having to hire all the time, that's a clue that it may not be the kind of quality of care that you're looking for. So find out the average length of stay for the employees, because good places, people don't leave.
Yep. That's very true. Very true. I know at the nursing home my mom lived in one for 14 years. And for 10 of it was really good, but the last 4 was really difficult because they had 3 staff that were absolutely fabulous that worked as a team, and they all left, within about a month of one another, and they never regained what they lost. And they held so much history in terms of residents and stuff. It was really hugely impactful, and it was just never the same. And I'm not saying that happens in all places, but it can. Other places will have training set up, and they'll just plug those holes and get them filled up right away and not skip a beat. Every single one is different. So yeah, you definitely have to understand that. You also talk in the book about breaking down basically the levels of the disease and the scale, so that they can kind of understand maybe what to expect. Not that everybody follows the scale, because dementia is so individualized, and depending on what type of dementia somebody has, plus there can be some misdiagnosis on top of that, which happens in any medical situation. It's not a perfect base there, but I think that's very helpful information. And then you go into talking about getting in touch with the doctors and updating advisors as things progress, which I think is, again, it's you talk about building that team to support you throughout this, and that team can't help you if you don't update them. If you don't keep them in the loop.
Exactly. I wrote this book from the perspective of someone not having anyone, no caregivers. So who are we going to surround ourselves by on a regular basis? Who's got our back? And these are the kinds of relationships. I brought up the stages of dementia that are typically talked about in a medical setting, because so many times medical professionals use language we don't understand. Oh, Jane Doe, you're in stage 2. Bob, you're in stage 6. Well, wait, what does this mean? And I just wanted people to know that, you know, you don't go from getting a diagnosis to having the, you know, severe cognitive decline. There's all kinds of stuff that happens in between. And that was another way of my telling readers to calm down, that it's okay, and that there's things that will go in stages, and you can have a logical conversation with your medical team to help you go through the different stages. So that was the purpose of that. But again, not having anybody by our side, no caregivers, and having to deal with medical professionals, I just put as much as I could in this book that would help people take a look at the big picture so that they can have as much ammunition as they could regarding going forward and making plans. And, of course, a lot of it depends on the energy it takes to have these kinds of relationships. But, you know, they're there, and there are people who are willing to help us. And our job is to just keep asking, who's there for me, and how far will you go with me on this journey? And if you're not going to be available, who do you suggest will be available, and so on. It's an ongoing revolving door of questions and people.
Yeah, it truly is. And again, like any time in our life, our circle of friends, our supports, they change. You know, and so you kind of have to have a watchful eye for that. And you have to be afraid not to ask, because you're not going to get what you don't ask for, because people aren't going to know about it unless they're really paying close attention. And in this fast-paced world, I don't think as many people are paying close attention.
No. Well, especially because of people are relying on text messages and not being in person, and not really having the kinds of relationships that are sustainable. I mean, we can't help somebody through a text message or Facebook or whatever. We physically have to be with people, and we make decisions all day long. How are we spending our time, and how will we go forward? Are we willing to stick our neck out and be the friend we want somebody to be for us? And what does that mean? Sometimes it means you actually have to get on an airplane and be there physically. All of these decisions are ultimately going to land in our lap as we get older and as we need more attention, one way or another, right? We need attention. And I have that whole chapter on making friends, and what does that mean? You know, what's your criteria of a friend, and how do we get a family when we don't have one? And that was that ties that bind and unwind chapter that you were referring to, and accepting relationships as moving targets.
Yep. Well, and I think that's, so important. And if people are connected to the internet, there's a whole universe out there on the internet that is dealing with this. And so one of the things, we just did our dementia-friendly cruise this fall, and there were so many people that I have talked to and worked with that have dementia for years and years. I've been in this space now since 2009 that I've never met. And, I got to meet some of them. And it was like, and we've had this conversation on our Dementia Chats where it is really building a family and friendships. And the conversations are authentic and they're deep. They're not superficial. Which many of our in-person, conversations are very superficial. And yet there's nothing like being able to give somebody a hug or see them smile or hear their laugh, right in person and feel that energy. But you can get a lot of comfort and support through, many of the Facebook pages out there. And they have, a lot of them are closed groups. So, what you write isn't going to go public. it stays within the group and is respected. And, most of them have rules where people can't be pitching you, trying to sell you this, that, or the other thing. It's just about having honest relationships. So, that's another piece too.
I especially love, I'm a member of several closed Facebook groups, and I especially love when someone takes the initiative to say, hey, I live here. Is there anybody else in this group that is close by me? Let's get together and have dinner. And you see that very often. So you can start, you could be as isolated or as forthcoming as you want in these groups. And they are quite helpful because you can be sure at 2 a.m. somebody's on there talking about something, and you've got an instant ear. So it's good. It's good. Every kind of relationship we can have really helps.
Exactly. And you might end up communicating with somebody overseas and, hearing what they're doing over there, because, that's how even bringing the Memory Cafe over to the U.S. and the dementia-friendly communities, that's how it got here. Really was through Facebook and these groups, I talked with Norm McNamara, who's just a huge advocate, and he is personally living with dementia. And he told me about the Memory Cafe. I'm like, connect me. We need those here, and so we started setting those up or hearing about their dementia-friendly movements. And so we, talked with somebody else, and we picked up the first one in Wisconsin. It's exciting, empowering, and I think that's one of the biggest things these groups can help you with is they will make you realize that, yes, you're 10 steps behind somebody else, but you're 10 steps ahead of someone too. And you can still, give a hand out and lift somebody else up. And that, that gives us purpose. That makes us feel part of community. It's just so empowering on so many levels. And then when you're down, those hands are there to lift you up. And that is just such a comfort. It really does help pull that isolation piece away. You also talk in the book about receiving the diagnosis when employed. And I know that's very scary to many. Can you just share a little bit about that?
Well, one of the things that I hear, and you probably do too, is people say, if I do get a diagnosis, should I let my employer know? And that's a really good question, because it's just going to depend. But if you do get a diagnosis, the advice that I have heard over and over again is meet with your advisors, in other words, a lawyer or a financial planner, and, of course, your doctor, before you disclose any information to your employer. And the question for any of your advisors is to ask the question, should I disclose that I have been diagnosed? When should I disclose it, and who should I disclose it to? Very important questions before you say one word in the workplace. And then what you deserve is a rollout plan and the support of your employer after you sit down and you talk about, well, okay, we got to make a plan now within the workplace and go from there. It's a rollout, and it requires a transition plan that you can't get enough professional advice when you are diagnosed with whether this chronic illness or anything else, because people can continue to work if there's a good plan in place and if your employer is willing to break some new ground. And of course, there's another approach and more information if you decide to dive into this conversation, and that is to type in the words dementia-friendly workplace in your internet search engine, and you will be bombarded with all kinds of fabulous workplace initiatives and guidelines and more resources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when it comes to the workplace, you're going to want to get information on, just from a legal standpoint, what are your rights, within the company, and how will they work with you, or won't they? Some will adjust as your disease adjusts, others won't. And so, you just want to make sure you have all of that information in place. If you're going to apply for, Social Security, you're going to want to, know exactly what are your benefits going to be, how's that going to be affected, all of that stuff. There's so many different avenues in terms of protection. As much as I always tell people to kind of try to be authentic. You still have to protect yourself out there and see what's what. You also talked that Alzheimer's is not a prescription to stop living life, and I so agree with that, because I've seen so many people just blossom, and they actually say, I now this is the first time in my life I have a purpose. They really feel called to raise awareness and educate and be supportive of others. And their whole world, they look at it differently, just like anybody would with any chronic illness. It changes your perception of what's important in the world and in your life. And, that's pretty dang powerful stuff. Many have found, I think, a peacefulness in a strange way. In the disease, not necessarily all the time, I'm living my life's passion too, but I'm not at peace all the time. It's still called life, and you got your ups and downs, and nothing is perfect, that's for sure. But we have about 10 minutes left. Is there a particular chapter that you'd really like to kind of dive into a little bit more? If not, I'd love to talk about the ties that bind and unwind, because I think that's just kind of a cool thing that kind of gets people into relationships. But it's up to you.
Yeah, let's do that. I love your diving deep in the early diagnosis. I'm sure people are getting the picture that it's not the end of the world. In fact, it's the beginning of a time in life where people may surround you in lots of surprises in a good way. But other than that, let's talk about ties that unbind and unwind. And it's an interesting concept, right? We have to think about, what you mean you're not going to be here forever? I mean, wait a minute. That's a tough place to go. And yet it is, the way the world works is people are going to come and go. We're going to have friendships, and we're just going to be totally responsible for the amount of support we have as we get older and older. Now, the good news is I have seen for myself, I have a lot of old people in my life, people who are 30, 40 years older than I am, and they have been my role models for forever. And the good news is these are not people who necessarily have a lot of money. In fact, they are just living on Social Security for the most part, Medicare, and so on. And yet, time after time, they are surrounded by people in their final days, people who absolutely would do anything for them, and so on and so on. And I was always, how did they do this? How is it that they are surrounded by people who love them so much, and yet they have outlived absolutely everybody in their family and are constantly in the process of making new friends? And that's what that chapter is about. How in the world did you do that? So ties that bind and unwind. Here we come, right?
Yep. Well, and I love you. As soon as you flip that page, it goes to the Broken Hearts Club, accepting relationships as moving targets. And they always have been. You know, having dementia, growing old doesn't make any difference, you know. And I think that that's something we really need to teach our children, is that it's okay to say goodbye to somebody who doesn't align with you anymore, you know. And I know I didn't get that until I was really older, that it's like, you know what, I don't have to put up with this. I don't have to feel obligated to continue a friendship because it started, because things change, and it doesn't feel good.
Yes.
You know,
yeah,
anymore.
or being disappointed. Yeah, you know, we depend on people. We're dependable. We might ask for a simple favor and we get let down. Like, wait a minute, what am I doing? This is not good. I know that I'm lovable, and I know I'm certainly capable of being dependable and loving others. So how do I take how do I have the courage to really surround myself with people who are my true friends, and how do I become a true friend to others? And these are the questions, these are the kinds of questions we will be asking ourselves as we go through this litany of people who are coming and going, because they are coming and going.
Yep. Well, you also talk in this chapter, and I love this, widowhood before and after, because a lot of times when you're dealing with a chronic illness, there is that loneliness when someone is still here. You know, your relationship is changing and moving and shifting, and then, you know, afterwards when someone, you know, passes, and in different types of relationships, you know, or late life divorce, we're seeing more and more of that. You talk about being estranged or alienated. You know, like you said, relationships are very much moving targets, and how do you handle that? You know, how do you live with that? You talk about zero isolation, and you know, how do you develop a family around you? How do you deal with the loneliness of just preparing a meal for one? You know, all kinds of different things. I mean, you've really, I think, gone deep in a lot of this. Aging without children requires extra work. And I was just talking to somebody the other day about that. And, you know, you know, the support's not there. I have one daughter and a great son-in-law and grandkids, and, I just thank God every day, because, and I'm not that old, you know, I'm pushing 60, but it's like they are just there for me, you know, they just are, and I try to be there for them. And I just think, how lucky am I? But not everybody has that. You know, how do you get connected and stay connected is so important. And how do you make new friends? I have a group called the Dementia Reentry Caregiver Group, and they're really, you know, struggling with how do you make new friends? How do you figure out who you are today, because you're not who you were yesterday? And, you know, it's kind of like, who do I want to be when I grow up? Even though you look at yourself and go, I am grown up, but I'm still asking myself that question.
One of the tips that I got from one of my old friends is that just make sure you have plenty of young people in your life. And I'll never forget that, because she is a testament to surrounding herself with people 30, 40 years younger than she. And it proved to be, when she did die, people of all ages came to pay their respects. And I could see that this was one person who would never have to worry about being alone unless she wanted to be. But she was a good friend to these people. And what that means is going to be an individual concept for every relationship we have. One thing she did brilliantly was she constantly got all of us together for mealtime. And I do spend a time in the book on how to create mealtime so that if you think about it, Lori, that's one thing we can all do together. And I give lots and lots of ideas on creating times to create meals together. And this way, forging some kind of bonds around food. I'm Italian. We do this in our sleep. We're so used to using food as love, and I highly recommend it.
Oh, wonderful. Well, we got to wrap up here. We've only got about 30 seconds left. So I want to make sure that I get in your website, Joy, which is elderindustry.com, elderindustry.com. And you can always go to Amazon to purchase her book, Who Will Take Care of Me When I'm Old? This has just been a joy to have you on with us, Joy. And I hope you'll come back in the future. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
It's time to rethink, renew, and reimagine retirement. Hey everybody, Jared Sylvester here, host of Retire Repurposed. Now, this podcast is about the non-financial parts of retirement, which many times can be even more challenging than the financial. We believe retirement is not the end, rather the beginning of what could be the most impactful, purposeful, and fulfilling season of a person's life. So don't retire, become repurposed. To listen now, search Retire Repurposed on your favorite podcast platform, Senior Resource, or Life Audio.